Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie Kleber, and I am in charge of middle school and high school literacy professional development here at the Department of Education. And today we are focusing on session 2 of our middle school and high school literacy professional development series. Today is part 1, morphology, and this will be a 2-part series. Today's session will focus on what is morphology, how does this help my students, where does this fit into the scope of my lesson, and then part 2 will jump more into exclusive activities and how to plan for those activities. So we have 2 objectives today. By the end of the session, participants will be able to understand how morphology impacts fluency, spelling, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. And then we're going to determine where morphology-based activities fit into lessons in general. So morphology and how it applies to middle and high school. Morphology is defined as a system of units of meaning in words. And I'm going to show you some examples of that in just a second. Morphemes consist of a base and affixes, and an affix can be a prefix or a suffix. Teachers at the secondary level do not have the time or the expertise to remediate reading, but developing knowledge around morphology can help with reading fluency and vocabulary comprehension so that students read and understand the content area text better. So there's lots of implications for this in the middle school and high school classroom. These texts become increasingly complex as the students go through 6th through 12th grade, and understanding basic morphology will help them to have a general understanding of their content area text much better, and they're able to engage in them, discuss around them, write around them much more proficiently. So some more on morphemes. So morphemes are the smallest units of meaning in a word. Some words have one morpheme, such as play, show, and build, and others have multiple morphemes. So for instance, reconstructing and deconstruction have 4 individual morphemes in them. So if we look at reconstructing, there is a prefix that starts it out, which is re, and re means again, to do again. Con means thoroughly, to thoroughly do something. Struct is your base, and struct means to build. And then ing is a verb tense. It means it's happening in the present. And so if we put these together, it means that we are thoroughly building something again in the present tense. We don't think about that as we're reading the word reconstructing, but if students have a general understanding of re and con are very common prefixes, and so is ing as a suffix. If they have a general understanding of that, they will be able to, as they encounter words with all of those prefixes and suffixes, have a much better understanding of exactly what that word means and apply it to those words. If we look at deconstruction, just as another example, if you're totally unfamiliar with morphology, again, it has 4. So we have that prefix D, which means opposite of. Con, again, means thoroughly. Struct still means to build, and ion is the act or the process of. So if we put these together, we see that it's the process of thoroughly unbuilding something or taking something apart is what unbuilding something is, right? So if students understand, again, those prefixes and that base and that suffix, they have a much deeper understanding of what that word means and can apply those same things to other words. Morphemes provide students with numerous strategies for decoding, which is reading, to see these letters, these syllables, these patterns, and to understand what that word is. And then encoding, which is spelling. If I tell you what the word is, you're able to spell it out and take it apart, as well as enhancing vocabulary. As children learn the common prefixes, suffixes, and Latin and Greek bases, they gain new understanding of these meaning-based building blocks in English words. And we're going to dive more into that in the next couple of slides. But there's just a few Greek, Latin, and bases. If you understand those basic ones, can really help you unlock the meaning to many, many, many words. So here's Scarborough's reading rope. We jumped into this in session 1, the introduction to the science of reading for middle school and high school. And I told you that in middle school and high school, we do the majority of our development in that upper strand. We're hoping that students come to us with that lower strand mostly developed. But morphology plays a role in both strands, which is really exciting because this one strategy, this one teacher move, this one piece of reading really falls into and develops both vocabulary and students' ability to decode or to read. We said that in the first session, if you missed it, that if students have a general understanding of language comprehension, if they become increasingly strategic, and if they become increasingly automatic in their word recognition skills, this is what develops skilled readers. And so if we don't have skilled readers in our classrooms, but we understand and know the general principles of these two strands, and we develop students' ability within those strands, then we build students' ability to become a skilled reader, which is very exciting. So teaching morphological awareness, how do we teach this? So the English language consists of over 1 million words. As students begin to encounter unfamiliar words in textbooks and in literature, they will be required to make inferences about word meaning based on analysis of the word's morphological structure and context. Again, those affixes and those bases. This is interesting because, like I said, as students go through these grades 6 through 12, they become more complex. And so as they become more complex, students may struggle or need more development time around understanding what the text is saying so they can comprehend the text. And only once we comprehend the text are we able to make those inferences and see what the author is trying to get us to understand without explicitly saying it. And we call on students a lot in middle school and high school to make many inferences. And so the student's ability to understand the morphological structure and context is going to help with making those inferences. By the age of 10, morphological awareness is a better predictor of decoding ability than phonological awareness. And decoding and phonological awareness may be a little Greek to us in the middle of school and high school word, but basically what this statement is saying is that morphological awareness, the ability to understand different morphemes and their meaning, predicts better reading ability or decoding ability than just sounding out the words. So this is exciting as well. And there are 12 common Latin and Greek base elements that offer semantic clues to the meanings of approximately 100,000 words. So just these basic, and I have them on some upcoming slides, but just these basic common Latin and Greek base elements will help unlock the meaning, like I said, for those 100,000 words. So there's a lot of things that morphological awareness improves. It improves vocabulary comprehension. Just like I showed you with the examples of reconstructing and deconstruction, you are able to understand that these basic prefixes, bases, and suffixes help you to understand anytime that shows up in another vocabulary word, and it adds to our vocabulary and our understanding of different words. It helps with your students' ability to read aloud. If students are familiar with these morphemes, then they more readily are able to read them out loud and they know them on sight and are able to become more fluent. It helps in students' ability to spell. So if we understand these patterns that happen and note the occurrences of them and see them very frequently, then we're able to improve our spelling. It also improves phonological awareness. It builds up awareness of speech sounds. Every time I see re, I know that that's how that sounded out and I can apply it to different words. Struct, anytime struct happens, I can see that and apply it to sound it out to many different words. It also helps with reading comprehension. If we have a better ability to read fluently, if we have a better ability to comprehend vocabulary words and sound out words, then we're going to comprehend what the text is saying much more readily. So morphology instruction really benefits all students. It benefits advanced students. If students are able to learn and understand not just basic morphemes, but more advanced morphemes, they're going to be able to read higher level texts. You can independently assign these advanced students much more complex text because they'll understand the morphological structure of all these different words. It helps the average performing student. So you're able to control what morphemes you teach in class. And whether you're a math teacher or a science teacher or a social studies teacher, you control what morphemes they learn. And so they're able to understand the text and the curriculum that they see on a daily basis. It benefits students who have exceptionalities, who are looking at these literacy supports. The more practice they get with this different morphemes and the morphological structures, the better their ability to decode and to read is going to be apparent in all of their different texts as well. Now, these students will need more exposure to and more support with morphological structures, But if the average student in your class practices once or twice, they just may need 3 or 4 more times. And there's different things you can do to incentivize them and understand what the payoff is. You know, these students may not be the ones who lift their hand or raise their hand first to volunteer to read, but as you build their confidence and their ability with reading, with these structures, they're going to be more comfortable and excited about doing that. It definitely benefits our English language learners as well, because there are different cognates that you can tag that happen in both the English and in their native language, that are going to help create meaning in these words too. For instance, bicyclette in French and bicycle in English both have the prefix by, which means two. So helping them to tag this and anchor their language, their native language, in the English language is going to help them to become better stewards of the text and the concepts as well. So how do we teach morphology within the scope of what we're already doing within our lessons that already exist? So the first thing you need to do is determine which morphemes are best for you to teach. So you could start with a brief introduction, because if they've never had morphology practice, you kind of need to introduce what is morphology, what is a morpheme, and how it's going to help them. And you can start with the most common prefixes and suffixes to ensure students understand the most common and the high frequency words that are happening in their everyday text and just in life in general. Then you can branch out to Latin and Greek roots for the demands of your secondary content area. So if you're a math teacher and you're teaching triangle, or if you're a science teacher teaching photosynthesis, or if you're a social studies teacher teaching antebellum, there's different morphemes that you can teach to help students understand those words. Then there are going to be some examples on the next few slides on what the most common words are. Morphology has to be taught explicitly, though, at first, in order for it to be effective. When you're first introducing morphology, just like I did with you with reconstructing and deconstruction, you have to help the students understand that there's different parts, that if you define those different parts and how you arrange them to put them together, they make new meaning. And once you model this, 1 or 2 or 3 times depending on the classes or the students' need, then you can go ahead and just have them practice and have repeated practice on their own. But they need some explicit and direct instruction initially to see how to do this. So when introducing morphemes for the first time, start with those most commonly used. It's going to be on the next slide. I'm going to be able to show you some. You're going to explain to students why they are studying morphemes and what it will do for their progress in your class. All learners, even adult learners, need to understand, in order for them to really dive into the learning and to more importantly retain that learning, they need to understand, why am I even learning this and what is this going to do for me? And at the middle and high level especially, there's a problem with motivation, or just there's not as much motivation as they were when they were younger to learn. So if they understand that there are multiple ways that this is going to help them, and that slide that goes back into helps with vocabulary and reading comprehension, if they understand these things, they're going to be more readily excited to learn about it and to more importantly retain it so that they can use it in their future reading and learning. Once morphemes are introduced and you've done this direct or explicit instruction, you've taught a few introductory based morphemes, then you can choose morphemes that are most common to your content area and relevant to your unit of study or chapter. And be sure to consult your curriculum to determine if there's already morphology embedded, and there may be. But if there isn't, then definitely make sure to choose the words inside of your curriculum that best help you with this. And just a special note, pay attention to the scope and to how your curriculum flows as well. Like for instance, science is a mostly inquiry-based curriculum and learning. And so you're learning through exploration. And so you may not want to or be able to front load the terms, but they still are going to fit within the scope of your lessons. So these are 18 common Latin base elements. And you have your root spellings on one side and you have your meanings on the other. And as a teacher, it's important for you to understand what the common ones are. But as students start to dive into them, they may need a little cheat sheet like this, so that when they're breaking these down, in the next session, we'll talk about a very common activity called word matrices. And they're going to take these little parts of words, put them together to create meaning. They're going to need a little anchor like this to understand what the bases mean. But for instance, if you see a word and it has form in it, they need to understand, or they will understand, that form means to shape as they start to practice with this. This slide comes with the most common Greek base elements. So you have a lot of Latin and Greek bases that exist in the English language as well as Anglo-Saxon. The English language is like a marriage of all these different languages, which is sometimes why people say it's harder to understand. It's not necessarily harder. It's just that if we understand this, we're able to pull from those different places. So again, if you're teaching photosynthesis and you understand that photo means light, each time you see a word with the base photo in it, you'll understand that light plays some role in that word. Here are some other morphemes to teach. We have the most common affixes is the first one. We have prefix, suffix, and root by grade level. And this is a pretty extensive list by grade level. Once again, though, if your students have never had exposure to morphology or morphemes, you may want to start with some of the earlier grades just to give them an idea of what this looks like. Then you have common suffixes, common Greek and Latin roots, and common numerical prefixes if you're a math teacher. And this is a website that's free to log in and create an account. But just note that you click on templates and printables and then click on vocabulary to view these resources. But again, one of the best resources to use is your unit or study a chapter because it's most relevant to the students that you're teaching. And just check to see if it already exists in there so you have a place to start. So here are some different activities to integrate with the morphemes, and this is what session 2 or part 2, it'll be session 3 of morphology looks like. I will show you 2 of these. I'll model 2 of these activities for you so that you can go ahead and use them in the class if you'd like. So some different activities are provide definitions and examples. Word family maps, which are called word matrix or word matrices, is definitely one of the strategies I'm going to teach you about. Word sums, find the roots. They might be reading and they're asked to find the roots they've currently learned to assign meaning. Fix the affix, so maybe the prefix or the suffix is incorrect in the context that it's used in the text. A word sort, building blocks, and then syllabicating the big words. And one of the things, especially on level readers and advanced readers, by the time they get into 6 to 12, there are what we call multiple syllabic words, and these have multiple syllables. As children learn to read, they start with single syllable words. They build up to words with 2 syllables, 3 syllables. By this level, they have multiple syllables in them. And if they understand that you can kind of break those words apart to create meaning and understand big words, then this strategy is going to help them too. So when do you teach morphology? When does this fit into a lesson? You can do it when you're introducing a unit or a chapter as a pre-work activity. You can practice the already learned roots and affixes that can occur either as a warm-up activity before your lesson, and some teachers call this a bell work or bell ringer. You can do it as an early finisher or to reinforce the comment. And just be aware that the initial instruction should be direct and explicit teaching. And then once you've done that, all of these things can be done just to reinforce and as practice. So just some final thoughts. Morphology instruction can be used to increase fluency, spelling, expand a student's vocabulary, and to improve reading comprehension. A few minutes of targeted direct instruction from teachers can help students become more proficient within the content areas. And this is not something you should be spending or can spend, 20, 30 minutes a day on. This is something that if you have 5 to 6 minutes a day or 5 to 6 minutes, even 3 times a week, it can be very powerful in helping the students better read and understand your content area text better. So the next session will go into more detail about the kinds of activities that can be done to engage students in morphology. But in the meantime, just so you can start processing this learning, I want you to think about where do you see this fitting into your daily instruction or weekly instruction or monthly instruction? Where do you think this fits? And that'll help you dive deeper into next session's work so you're prepared to start implementing these activities. And as always, if you have any questions or suggestions, please don't hesitate to contact us either at louisianaliteracy@la.gov or myself personally at natalie.cleavier@la.gov. I'm open to any and all questions and suggestions. This is an 8-part series that we're rolling out right now, but I'm definitely open to suggestions and creating other professional development around your literacy needs if you notice that you have a particular need. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next session.